Well, hi there. I'm here with my Sulcata Tortoise, Big Daddy, because I want to show you something awesome that we have just built for him. I don't know how many of you know the story of Big Daddy, but Big Daddy is a rescue sulcata that I took in a few years back. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't in the market for a Sulcata tortoise. I had a yellowfoot tortoise, and that was plenty of tortoise for me. But a friend of mine had taken in Big Daddy as a rescue and didn't have a place for him, and he asked if I could take him in. And I didn't have a place for him either. And so I was like, no, I can't. I don't have any place for a sulcata. He then was going out of town for just a few days, and he just asked if I'd watch him for a few days. And during those few days, well, I kind of fell in love with Big Daddy, and my wife fell in love with Big Daddy, and I started doing my homework on Sulcata tortoises, and I got to building the largest enclosure I could fit in my house, which was an 8-foot by 4-foot enclosure. And that's where he's been, and I feel like that enclosure it's okay, right? Like, it's not super cramped, he can move around, but I certainly wouldn't want it to be any smaller, and I would love for it to be bigger. Well, now, here we are in Clint's reptile room. And even though COVID has caused us a bit of a financial setback, and we're working on a much tighter budget than we originally had in mind, we have been able to upgrade Big Daddy to an enclosure twice the size of his original enclosure. And because it was built on kind of a budget, I feel like this is something you guys might want to see because you might have similar needs. Not everybody has $10,000 for a giant enclosure. What can you build on a more modest budget? So I want to walk you through this enclosure, which currently is actually still in 2 pieces, so I can show you the underside and exactly how we built it. I want to walk you through all the parts, and then we are going to finish it off. We're going to put it together, we're going to seal it up, we're going to put the substrate in there, and give Big Daddy his first time exploring his brand new super enclosure. So let's get started. All right, well, welcome to Big Daddy's new enclosure. I think I'm just going to start showing you all the little details that we did. So, for starters, and you'll be able to see this better when we get underneath, but I've got just a composite board that's 8 feet by 4 feet and by about 1/2 inch of thickness, which isn't strong enough to support itself. So we've got a pretty decent frame of 2x4s underneath, and you'll be able to see that better here in a moment. And then we've got essentially a fence built around the outside. This is a 2x6, and these are 2x4s, and I've left this little gap here, which I actually really like. When I experimentally put Big Daddy in here, you might have seen this if you follow us on Instagram, you'll notice he walked around, and it's not big enough for him to stick his head through, but he seemed to really enjoy going around and just looking out. He spent a ton of time exploring and using this as a place to look out without ever trying to climb over, which is something that he often tries to do, is climb over things. This sort of seemed to satisfy his need to look out without needing to climb over the top. And then on top, on the inside of this L, we've got a bench. And this bench is made out of 2x6s. Because the board here is 8 feet long, we actually needed to use 10-foot 2x6s in order to make this corner work over here, though these are considerably shorter on this side. And I'll get to what these posts are all about here in a second. The short posts, those are just for supporting the fence, but these taller posts that we've got here will actually support a second, smaller tortoise enclosure that we're actually going to have on top for our baby tortoises, and it's going to also provide a really excellent large hide and shelter for Big Daddy. We haven't done this part yet. This will come in the future, but we've got the posts in place for that already. On the bottom, and this is a really important step that I actually did when we brought over Big Daddy's current enclosure and Gus's current enclosure, is I put down these plastic sheets on top of the boards that are on the bottom, on top of the panels, so that they'd be water resistant. This is what these sheets look like, and I really, really like them. They're just thin plastic, but they're pretty durable. They roll up, they're easy to cut. You can cut them with scissors. I've been using them in a lot of enclosures lately, and I anticipate I'll be using them in a ton of our builds coming up. But I really, really like them. And so that's what's on the floor. In addition, for waterproofing, I painted the bottom few inches where substrate's going to come into contact with the wood so that the wood doesn't rot. Sulcatas are a dry enough species of tortoise, and I'm in a dry enough climate that I'm not really worried about rot, so I didn't bother to treat everything. If you're in a more humid climate though, you'd probably want to either paint all of the wood or treat the wood in some way. I was able to leave a lot of this untreated because of where we are and what kind of tortoise this is. All right, let's flip it over. So this is the bottom of the enclosure, and both sides look the same underneath, so I'm just going to show you the one. But you can see this is our composite board. This is our 2x4 frame, and you might notice we actually got a really rad jig that we used in order to do these pocket holes. You probably saw them on our support posts as well. And that allows you to screw these in at an angle so that they can come in flush with one another. It was really cool. First time I've used that, and I really, really liked it. We've got casters. Everything in the reptile room we're trying to put on casters so that we can move it around, especially this that we'll be using not only for an enclosure but also for a seating area during presentations. And so it'll give us a little bit of extra space. But we've got all these casters on here that'll support the weight. Some of them lock so that the enclosure won't move when we don't want it to. And it's going to be really awesome. I can tell you, Big Daddy and Gus Gus, their enclosure in my house, I didn't have it on casters. And I had a lizard escape on a couple different occasions. One time it was Gus Gus, one time it was my monitor. And they would get behind that enclosure, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to get them out of there. And so when I moved their enclosures over here, I put them on casters. And when I built this one, it was going on casters. I want everything on casters so I can move it if I have to. All right. Let's put them together. Okay, I will begin by telling you that all of the straight cuts that we did on the wood, those were all done with a miter saw. And this diagonal cut that we did on the benches, and actually the ends of the benches, those were done with a skill saw. The 8-foot by 4-foot panels didn't need to be cut down. We probably would have needed to use a table saw for the long panels. However, we probably could have gotten by with a skill saw as well. But that's how we got these down to their current size. I will tell you, especially when I was doing this by myself, I use these clamps a lot. And I'm going to be using clamps right now to bring these together, these two pieces, as tight as possible before I screw them into one another. All right, so let's get these things clamped into place. The back part of this corner isn't perfect just because of the way that they were cut. Every time I do a project, I get a little bit better, but I'm not perfect at this. So the corner that really matters is this one. I really want those to match up really nicely. This one back here will actually be concealed by the cave. It's not that big of a deal. But I'm going to use these clamps to bring these together really, really tight before I screw them into one another. And these things have been invaluable as tools for this entire build. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to use my drill, and I'm going to drill a pilot hole right back here. This will be the first screw that will hold this all together. The screws that I've used, I've actually been using for quite a few builds now. I really, really like them. They've got a hexagonal head on them, and so they use a star bit. So I guess it's actually a star head. They use a star bit that fits in there really well, and I find that these screws never get stripped out. In fact, they're so tough that they actually strip out my bits more often than they strip out the screw. Fortunately, every box of them comes with a bit, so that's really handy. So I'm going to put that on in there. And I will mention I have a pocket hole up here, and I never put the screw in because the other bench wasn't there yet. Now's the time. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of scrap wood and I'm just going to put it in here and I'm going to use it to join the two together on the other side. So we'll drill a pair of pilot holes. There's one. There's two. Tighten this guy up. I can see why we left that one out a little. Okay, so now the two are combined. The last thing I'm going to do to connect them one to another is I'm going to put a little bead of silicone down here on this gap, just like I've done actually at all the edges. It's something that I didn't do with Big Daddy's previous enclosure or Gus's, and I find I lose a little bit of substrate through there. So I put this silicone bead down there, I'm going to put it right here where the two connect, and then we're just going to let it set up. So I'll go ahead and get that done. Throw a little bead down. Got a little bit less of a guide than I do on the sides, so it's probably going to be kind of sloppy. I'll clean it up with a paper towel though here in a minute. It's going to be covered with substrate, so if it's a little sloppy, I don't even care, as long as it's enough. Just a happy little bead of silicone. All right. We'll give that a little time. All right. So here we are. We are almost done with this. We're going to use, I bought several bags of the same mixture we used in our blue tongue video. And that was topsoil and play sand, about a 60-40 ratio. I'm going to add all that I have left of that. It's probably not enough. We'll probably end up buying more in the future, but it should be enough to at least give you an idea what this is going to be like. And then we'll put Big Daddy in here and let him explore. Spreading it out. No rake. Like a fool. All right, the moment of truth. I didn't have as much soil as I wanted to, so I'll be buying a bunch more and adding it. And I've still got to add things like his water feature and, of course, this big hide here. But I'm just excited to see him explore this space. So, without further ado, Big Daddy, welcome to your new home! Well, that was awesome. I want to say a special thank you to our patrons at Patreon who helped support this build. He looks like a little turtle in a big, big enclosure now, and it's super fun to watch him walk around and explore and eat. I'm loving this, guys. Hopefully soon you can come by and check out Big Daddy and the reptile room. This has just been so much fun. We'll keep you updated on how things are going with this enclosure and when the next stages are done. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon.
Talk to me about that drill.
Talk to me about that drill.
Yeah.
My drill?
That was an amazing drill.
You like that drill?
I love that drill. Just how you took off the front piece or whatever?
And it has a lot of bits. I don't happen to have this bit for it, but it has a lot of bits that just sit underneath the drill portion. So you pop it off and the screwdriver's ready, and then you just click it back on. You don't even have to click in something else.
That was rad.
It'd be neat. Kevin Mitchell had a similar drill to that one, and I found that one at a yard sale several years ago and bought it for like $4. Loved it.
That was pretty cool.